Hey there, you're listening to the Not So Breakfast Show with Sasha and Ish. Alright, welcome to the Not So Breakfast Show today, and you are listening to the one about the difference between preparation and planning. And you might be thinking, Ish, what's the difference? Well, we're going to tell you what the difference is because there is one, and it's an important distinction. Plus, I've got Sasha coming to us live from Harvard, which gives us the opportunity to really figure out what she does think of her family. So is there anything that you're missing from New Zealand while you're overseas?
This is where I'm supposed to say my family, aren't I?
That would be nice, but they don't listen to the podcast.
Yeah, true. They won't even ever hear me say this.
All right, that's the show. Let's get it. All right, welcome to the Not So Breakfast Show today, and I'm excited because I've got Sasha on my computer screen, which I do every single week, but this time you're coming at me from Harvard in Boston, Sash.
I am coming to you live from Harvard Business School, Cambridge, Boston, Massachusetts. Yay!
What is it like in the outside world?
I would love to tell you that it's very difficult. I would love to tell you that it's a very challenging environment. That's true, but not for the reasons you might think. So I'm just going to go with the truth. It's amazing. And it's been a really fine line for me to walk between, do I bring joy by sharing how amazing it is to the people that I'm speaking to back home, or do I try and temper what an amazing time I'm having, because it can only be tough. Back home in Aotearoa, New Zealand, people are still in lockdown. You've had that great Super Saturday vaccination. So it's really exciting that there's progress happening in New Zealand towards more freedom after our Delta outbreak. But I know heaps of people are still feeling a little flat, a little bit tired, and so I don't know that everybody wants to hear from me going, wow, guess what, amazing meal, I had an amazing outdoor restaurant with some amazing new friends that I probably didn't even pay for, because though I tried to pay, someone else picked up the bill.
Well, no, I want to hear about it because I feel like I'm living vicariously through you at the moment, and it must have been quite a shock going from Hamilton to Harvard. Like two opposite ends of the scale.
Well, I think you're being a bit dismissive of Hamilton.
Isn't that our thing? It's definitely my thing.
Hamilton is a great place to live and raise your family. Don't let anyone tell you any different. But yeah, there are some really stark contrasts. And even getting on the plane. So before COVID, I used to travel a reasonable amount, and I was at the age in my life where I was just starting to travel. My kids were old enough that things were starting to happen. You know, we've talked about this before, being in that slightly older age, being 48, people listen to you. I don't know why, but they do. And so it's a really nice kind of stage in life to be getting to. And then COVID just put a stop to all of that. So I get on the plane and I'm really emotional. For a couple of reasons. One is I feel the slight sense of betrayal and the fact that I'm leaving my family behind at level 3. My daughter in particular would love to be going somewhere, anywhere. You know, she, through the COVID period, she's had school trips to New York cancelled. She's had all her dance performances cancelled. She's had her school ball cancelled. Tough, man. And then you say, oh, see you, Mum. Off you go. Have a great time in America. Why don't you? And she's been great about it, but I feel the guilt of that. And then I also just had this little bit of worry where I go, maybe I'm going to get COVID, which I feel okay about, but it's irresponsible. You have this thing where it's irresponsible. So one of the most freeing things about actually getting on the plane and coming up here is realizing how much of the world is moving. And I understand why we're not in New Zealand, and I don't want to kind of get into that. But to have this sense of tiny bit of normality where people are going about their business, doing what it is that they need to give value and to buy and sell, and the exchange of goods and ideas, it's all still happening. And to feel just a tiny part of that is so incredibly invigorating. And I wish that everybody could get to do that, could get to have their cup filled from that experience again. And I just can't wait until we get that ability to reconnect with the world again.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear that there is some normality out there. because it sometimes does feel like it's just going to stay this way forever. But we know it's not. We know it's going to move on, but it does feel a bit like that.
Well, and there's massive restrictions here. So to be clear, indoors here, we are masked the whole time. So every lecture is masked, every meal, every restaurant you go to, anywhere that you are indoors with other people, it's mask on. And then you take your mask off to eat. And in some environments, you take your mask off to sip your drink, and then you put your mask back on and you stay masked until you're ready to have another drink.
Well, that does sound like there are some restrictions there, but at least those restrictions, I guess, now are able to be worked around and people are starting to navigate that as their new normal. And maybe that's a good frame up for where we're going to head with our discussion today, because we're going to talk about the difference between preparation and planning, which kind of sounds like the same thing, but they really do have quite different meanings, don't they?
Yes, they do. And I think so often we treat them interchangeably. We go, you prepare for something, you plan for something. And I think it's really useful to ask ourselves, what is the difference about being prepared and being planned? And in what situations is planning not possible? So all you can do is do the work to be prepared.
Yeah. So can you give me an example of where you might prepare for something versus planning for something?
Well, I think there's a whole range of situations in our professional and our personal lives where we cannot plan to make something happen.
Right.
So when there are things that are outside of our control, we can't just plan and execute as if everything we want to happen will happen. And the best example that I can think of is when you were single, because I remember this so clearly. I was single and I didn't want to be single, but I couldn't just put a plan in that says, well, I'm 26 now and single, and by the time I'm 27, I want to have been in a long-term relationship for 6 months so that when I'm 28, I can get engaged, and then by 29, I can get married. Those are not things you have control over. You can't just say, well, tonight's the night that I'm going to go to a bar, meet someone. I mean, you can do that, but that would most often involve lowering standards. If the night that you'd chosen just turned out to be a pretty lean night, there was just sort of old guys at the bar who are on to marriage number 3, that might not be what you were looking for. So you can't set targets around things that involve other people or other events taking place.
Yeah, but you could prepare yourself for if you meet the right person.
Absolutely. So you could be prepared so that if the opportunity presented itself, you were in a position to take it. I mean, that's a positive expression of it. The flip side is, and this is what we've seen right through COVID, is how prepared are people for crisis or for the unexpected? So how quickly can you respond to that situation? And you might have, contingency planning or disaster planning, but when there's uncertainty about what the actual crisis is going to be or what it's going to look like, then all you can have is preparation.
Yeah. And a lot of businesses now are preparing for lockdowns or preparing for future events based on having cash readily available. So, pre-COVID, pre these disasters, businesses probably had a small amount of cash available, but you really want your cash invested and working for you. It's not just sitting in the bank, right? But now money in the bank is actually part of preparation. It's like, how long can we stay closed? How long can we pay our staff? How long can we pay the bills that we need to pay? And I've got a keynote coming up for the PT Council, that's Personal Trainer Council, and it's like a breakfast. And we're going to tackle the topic of risk as a contractor in today's business world. So, and it's really looking at that diversity of income. It's looking at risk mitigation around how much money you need on hand at any time. Because you are often at the mercy of somebody else's business, and you're at the mercy of situations that are just outside of your control.
We had an amazing session this morning with a professor talking about supply chain logistics. And we talked about the difference between actual insurance. So you can get life insurance and business interruption insurance, car insurance, and what the class came up with as a term, which was operational insurance. And what you're talking about is operational insurance. So what are the things that you can do to build into your operation and be preparing for something? You're not exactly sure what it's going to be, but it's something bad.
Yeah.
And what do you need to do to be prepared? And what do you need to do to be ready? And that's such a useful thing to understand and be able to do.
Yeah, well, We had a relative of ours, it's actually Joe's uncle, and during the Christchurch earthquakes, he was the man responsible for being able to abseil all of the people out of the Forsyth Bar building. And that building got heavily damaged and people couldn't access down, people couldn't get up, and there was some issues with the integrity of the building. But because he had all his climbing gear in his office, he was actually able to get people out. And what's interesting is like why he had the climbing gear in his office in the first place, because it's not like your stock standard, oh, this is my climbing gear, I just keep this in the cupboard for a rainy day. He always had a feeling like, what would happen if I couldn't get out because of something, or there was a fire, or how would I get out of this building? And he had prepared ways to get out of that building. And then all of a sudden, when something happened, he was absolutely prepared, and he was able to belay out a whole lot of people from that building, and they got to safety, which was, just amazing.
That's incredible, right? And there's a couple of things that I'd like to unpick about what you're saying. First of all, give us some context. How tall is the Forsyth Bar building? Guesstimate. Has it got 20 floors?
More than 10.
So there are no options called jumping or walking down yourself and surviving. And what I love is that instinctively he was able to recognize that if the lifts and the stairwell were compromised, he was stuck. And so I think one of the skills about being prepared in a disaster sense is to turn on, again, not just our self-awareness, but our situational awareness. As an entire planet, we know what happens when people get stuck in buildings. Mm. So this is post 9/11. We see what happens when people can't get out. We've seen the falling man, the people who are jumping out of those windows. So that might heighten our kind of sense that says when we're in a tall building, what are our options? But so many people who worked in that Forsyth Bar building were aware of 9/11, but just hadn't really ever turned their mind to it. And that was different from Joe's uncle, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He goes, and I can bet $1 million that if he had shared that with people in his workplace, a bunch of them would have gone, what a Looney Tune. Right? What a Looney Tune. We all know that one health and safety officer at work that just is the merchant of doom, right? This is going to happen. This could happen. Danger everywhere. And I think part of the thing about being prepared for the crisis sense, because we're talking both about being prepared for the good, but also being prepared for the bad, is to at least ask ourselves what might go wrong. And then what can we do to operationally prepare for that?
Yeah, and this is the Swiss cheese model, right? Trying to mitigate risk. So this is the thing that we want to avoid. So we put the first protocol in place, and then we put the next one in place, and then we put the next one in place. And the more protocols you have in place and the more systems you have in place, the better. But every system, every protocol, every solution you put in place has a hole in it, just like Swiss cheese. And when those holes line up, that's when the disaster happens. So the best way to mitigate risk is to reduce it or eliminate it completely. But where you can't, you put these things in place. But everything that you put in place still can fall apart. In the wrong situation, everything just, the holes line up.
We had some fascinating examples in class today. I'll share a couple of them with you. The people who are amazing at doing this kind of preparedness stuff are a number of Japanese countries because they are so familiar with earthquakes. Mm. So an earthquake happens and that can shut down your factory. So what are you going to do to keep producing, and how quickly can you get up and running again? And not long after the Christchurch earthquakes that you're talking about, of course, they had big earthquakes up in Japan, and that triggered a tsunami. Mm-hmm. And the tsunami and earthquake affected the nuclear reactor in Fukushima. And so you had this triple whammy where it's not just the earthquake, it's not just the tidal wave, and it's not just the fact that your nuclear reactor has been compromised. And so they have got these plans, and they implement the plans, and away they go. There's this level of preparedness for it. And it's interesting to observe culturally the fact that there is a level of preparedness for when things go wrong compared to other societies that say, what could possibly go wrong here? Mm. It's like, this is like a once in 100-year event. And yet, just off, if we think in our lifetime, 2008, we had the global financial crisis. We've had, in Japan, there's been this series of natural disasters, and in other places, think about wildfires. We've experienced the natural disaster of Christchurch. How many of us thought that there was ever going to be an earthquake? And then that's been followed in reasonably quick succession by this global pandemic. I mean, if you wanted to take a dim view, and I know that you have faith, Ash, you believe in God, but do you think God is trying to kill us all?
It does feel like that.
Kind of feels like, if this is part of your plan, where do we get to the good bit?
Exactly.
Where do we get to the living happily ever after bit? And I know if you have faith, like death is not such a scary thing, because you're like, you're going to a beautiful afterlife. But for those of us who don't have that to look forward to, it's feeling a little bit personal at the moment. And I think one of the things that's been interesting about COVID, even for people who are prepared, so your workplace might have had a contingency or disaster plan, so we know what we do in an earthquake. The thing about COVID is it completely dispersed everybody's workplaces. So instead of saying, one of the things that I love to talk about in leadership training is, what leaders are able to do is run towards the pressure. So you want to go to the seat of the fire, or you want to go to where the disaster has happened, or what is the crisis situation, and our leadership instinct says, let me get in there, let me help solve this. And in COVID, rather than say, let's get the team together to discuss this, we had to say, let's get the team away from each other. Everyone stay home. And we had to come up with all these new ways of working. So I think it's a fascinating time in history. But I'm also stunned by how stupid we are. And I mean both as people generally, but also as you and I are pretty personally stupid. And we've talked about how the earthquakes have shaped us. And so, maybe you can share with everyone really why you should not listen to us about anything, because we never learn.
We'll be right back.
If there was one skill that could double your income, advance your career, and increase your ability to influence, it is the skill of presenting. Whether it's on stage, in the boardroom, or at a job interview, the 30-Minute Presenter program will help take you to the next level. So check out our Instagram page, click the link in the bio, and get started on the 30-Minute Presenter program. Yeah, well, we both went through the earthquakes. We both went through all of that stuff that we had to deal with. And neither of us have any type of survival kit. You would think that would be the one thing that we would learn is have water stored, have food stored, have a certain amount of cash on hand. That was the thing I remember the most about the earthquakes, is there was just no money, because there was no money machines to get the money out of, because there was no power. So really, if you had cash, well, you could still trade and you could still buy stuff, but without that, it really does make it difficult. And then you kind of go on the fact that just water and food and being able to access that, or not even be able to travel for that because the roads are smashed up. All of that makes me think that I should have a higher level of preparedness than I do.
Yeah, well, you should give yourself a talking to about that.
Were that you, Sash?
Well, I'm thinking
you're going to bunker.
I have moved to the most seismically safe place in New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
Hamilton ain't shaking. It ain't going anywhere. I think maybe when you do your personal training talk and you're talking about the need for liquidity, you can explain that you mean literal cash. Not just money in the bank. You mean money under the mattress.
Our grandparents had it right.
They were onto something. So let's take a look at how this plays out in our personal lives, both from a what could possibly go wrong perspective. And I think it's really dangerous to live personally with this mindset of I need to be ready for things to go wrong. But I think lots of the sensible actions that we can take that have a level of preparedness are actually just kind of getting life right. So insurance is an obvious example of that. We all know people who decided not to renew an insurance policy, a literal insurance policy, because they go, I'm not going to need that. And then it's the weekend after that they crash their car. And there will be some faulty logic where they go, I'm a really good driver. I haven't had an accident for 5 years. What are the chances? I'm going to save that $200. So it's a false economy of saying I'm saving now, when in actual fact you want to be protecting yourself for the future. So that's an obvious one. One of the ideas that struck me in a second lecture that we had today, this idea, and you and I have talked about this before, that the best way to predict the future is to create the future, because none of us know what's going to happen. The challenge for us, though, is that even if we go to create the future, let's you and me think about where we might want to be in 2030. So 9 years' time from now. What does 2030 look like for us, both personally and professionally? We go, yeah, that's great. We want to do this. We want to do that. But the time it takes to create that means that we have to do something today. You have to do something now to create the future that we want. So part of preparedness for things that might go wrong is things like taking better care of our health.
Yeah.
If we decide when we're 60, oh, you know what, I really need to be healthy, it doesn't work like that. If you want to be healthy at 60, you have to start thinking about being healthy at 20. And what does healthy look like or mean, right? We don't get in shape by doing one big workout a week. There's this daily discipline. And I love the shift that says how you create the future is in the actions that you take today. Your daily actions and daily disciplines are actually what prepare you for the opportunities that will come.
Yeah. And that's really when we talk about the preparedness of our health, a lot of people might actually have a bit of a cross your fingers attitude to health and fitness. It's like, I hope I don't get cancer. I hope I don't get sick. But if I do, then I'd eat better. Or if I do, then I'll give up smoking. And really by that stage, you're already battling uphill, because suddenly it's almost like, let's make the pain so great that I'll be forced to do something, when actually if you did something now, you could possibly even avoid that situation or delay it way, way longer, and you'll be in a much better position to cope with it.
And the classic example of that is saving money, right? So, you're going to talk to these trainers about increasing the liquidity of their position so that they have a buffer if things go wrong. That's the classic saving for a rainy day. The ant and the grasshopper. The ant is working away, storing up for winter, getting ready, right? We know these stories. These are old fables and old morality tales. And yet we get stuck in the immediacy of what needs to be fixed today. And so many of us, you and me, are the same. And I mean, I recognize this in myself so powerfully. The ego kick I get from being great in a crisis, from going, let me rescue this, let me help, cometh the hour, cometh the man, here I am. And how many of those situations could potentially have been avoided or better handled if I had just been more prepared in the first place? Yeah. I mean, I tell you this, I don't know if this is going to be related or not, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Remember, you've heard me talk about Professor Linda Applegate. She uses the beautiful soccer analogy, the football analogy, where she said so often in business and our personal lives, we're just looking at the ball at our feet. And the challenge is to look up and say, what's ahead? Ted Lasso can teach us a few lessons about this as well, right? Hope is not a strategy. She shared the story yesterday about Ernest Shackleton. Now, we know Ernest Shackleton is the great kind of polar explorer. He got his men out of these incredibly dangerous and tricky situations. But this expedition that we looked at yesterday, he was down at kind of South George Bay, just about to go to Antarctica in his boat, and all the whalers at the whaling station said, you shouldn't go right now. There's so much sea ice. But Ernest Shackleton goes, I'm an explorer. I'm a man with a plan. I've got this prize that I want to go to. He had lost the race to the South Pole, so maybe he's feeling a bit twisty about that. So he just goes on down there anyway. And they get locked in by ice. They get crushed by ice. Their ship gets destroyed. It's just this harrowing kind of 16 months where everyone gets out okay, and he's praised as this great hero. And I don't get it. I'm sitting there in class going, why are we celebrating this guy? So I did what every rational Kiwi does. Excuse me, put my hand up. I don't know why I can't just shut up. Let it go, man. But I know that I'm here to learn, right? So you're here to learn. That means you're going to make yourself vulnerable. I put my hand up and I go, Why aren't we teaching this as what not to do? Here's a dude who everyone who'd already been to the area said don't go. He just should have said, you know what, this is not the time. And how often does our ego get in the way and we go, oh, I'm all ready, I want this to happen, I'm going to make this happen, I'm going to do it, when the timing's not right, and if we listen to all the warnings, we just pull our own heads in and wait. I mean, have you had situations like that where you've gone ahead and done something that perhaps you shouldn't have?
I think there's been situations where I've taken unnecessary risk with things and got away with it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that to me is part of the danger. It's like, well, I got away with it that time. So it's almost like your tolerance starts to go up slightly. It's like the person that goes out tramping and doesn't take their phone with them. They go out and they get away with it the first time because nothing happens. Next time they go out again, they get away with it. And they start to kind of build up this tolerance for, I'm okay, I've got the skill set. And then the moment it goes wrong, that's where the issue is, because all of a sudden you fall, you break your leg, you lose your way, and you have to spend the night and you don't have that phone. And that's why they say always tell someone where you're going and always take a phone with you. Like, always take food and more than you need. Like, that stuff is the preparedness for what might happen. But I think there's apathy that gets built in due to, well, it didn't happen last time, so it probably won't happen this time. And that could be in business, you just get a bit lucky, or it could just be in life in general.
Yeah, I reckon that one of the critical components of being prepared is to know what your personal risks are. And I recognize that one of my personal risks is to push play because I don't like being stopped.
Yeah.
I don't like someone coming late into a project and saying, oh, but have you thought about this? I'm inclined to go, yeah, nah, shut up. I'm going to keep going, even if they've raised a really good point, because I've got momentum now and I'm forging ahead. And part of my preparation now is to say, recognize that that's a risk of who you are. And so when you feel that little, maybe I should pause, know that my future success might be built on that pause. And the flip is also true. You might be a person who has a natural tendency to pull back at the last minute. And part of your preparation for something, you can't plan for the opportunity, but if you recognize that that's something that might derail your big opportunity, when you feel yourself pulling back from it, you can say, I suspected this might happen. I'm not going to let it happen this time.
Yeah.
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah, we see that now in the way businesses are approaching health and safety. I mean, it's just become such a big focus, but part of the focus is just putting on a lens. Like, health and safety shouldn't be something that you go, okay, now we need to tick off the health and safety part. It should be from what we view everything that happens, because it will be the one time that you decide to just do that little job, change that light bulb, stand on the top rung of the ladder, and you didn't have anyone holding it, or you shouldn't have been there on your own, and that's when the disaster happens, as opposed to maybe just taking a time to think, you know what, maybe I'll just get someone else to help me do this, or maybe I'm not the right person to do that exact thing. It's the filter and making sure that we have that lens on all of the time.
Yeah, and I think let's just not lose sight of the positive benefits of this. If you think about the things that you want to achieve in business and the things that you want to achieve in your personal life, but you cannot make happen on your own. They require you having an opportunity or an intersection with another person or with another set of circumstances. Your obligation to yourself is to do things today that enable you to be ready and prepared when that opportunity presents itself. So great to discuss today the difference between preparation and planning, about making sure that you are prepared for things that you can't exactly plan for, but you can anticipate that they might come. And that is both adverse outcomes and positive outcomes that you're trying to give effect to. Think about how this applies to your personal life and your professional life. And if you want to create a better future for yourself, you have to take some action today. You can't just say, well, in the future, when I want to be 10 kilos heavier, or I want to be 10 Ks richer, or I want to have 10 houses, or whatever your thing is, it doesn't just magically happen on the day in the future. We know that to be true, but so often we don't take action in the present.
So is there anything that you're missing from New Zealand while you're overseas?
This is where I'm supposed to say my family, aren't I?
That would be nice, but they don't listen to the podcast.
Yeah, true. They won't even ever hear me say this. I miss my family.
Oh, that's nice, Sash.
I also miss, we are so lucky in New Zealand with our food. And you know me, I've got rules about I will not complain about food.
Yeah.
And the Harvard Dining Hall has an amazing range. And, and if there's one thing that they love to do in America, it's put sugar in everything.
Sugar and increase the size.
Sugar in everything and super size. So I went to get some plain yogurt the other day and I put it on my fruit. Yeah, no, not plain, full of sugar. Yeah. Fascinating. I got some stuff to tell you next time as well about the cure for COVID. Woo! That's going to be good.
Last time I was in America, we went to a bar and we ordered a margarita and they said, do you want the large or do you want the bucket? I'm like, I'll have the bucket. It came out in a bucket and I shared it with my friend. It was the biggest margarita I've ever seen in my life. It was bigger than my head.
Maybe the idea is that you drink the margarita out of the bucket and then you chunder into the bucket after you've had too much margarita.
Better living, everyone. So what are you reading at the moment, Sash? That must be a long flight over.
Well, I'm not sure if you know, Ish, but I'm actually at Harvard Business School at the moment. I don't like to go on about it. And lots of speakers write books called "What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School." But I think we should just take advantage, and I'll tell you what they do teach you at Harvard Business School. I'm reading this book by an Argentinian guy who came to lecture to us. His name is Claudio Fernandez Araoz. I'm probably saying that wrong. Let's just call him Mr. C. Yeah, Claudio. Mm-hmm. And this book's called It's Not the How or What, but the Who. And the book is about how do you surround yourself with the best. So succeed by surrounding yourself with the best. And it's all about how to hire great people. And you know what it's like? We've talked about the war on talent, how hard it is to get good people. I'm reading this book at the moment. It's amazing. I recommend it.
Brilliant. I will get the audio version.
And just so you know, Ish, the person who's recommended Claudio's book is Jim Collins, and many of our business listeners will recognize Jim because he wrote just that little book called Good to Great. You may have heard of that, right? So yeah. Jim is saying listen to Claudio. I'm saying listen to Claudio.
Listen to Claudio.